Hello, algebra students. We have one day all about naming polynomials. We will spend 7.7 and 7.8 multiplying, adding, subtracting polynomials, but today we're just going to focus on what is a polynomial and can I name it? So our essential question is, can I identify or ID and name a polynomial? So firstly, we need to figure out what are these different types of polynomials and how do I name them? So here we go. How about this example? 2x squared plus 3x minus 5. How many terms is that? And that's something from 6th grade. We need to really talk about what is a term. And a term, I'm going to use I lost my yellow markers. A term is a combination of numbers, exponents, variables. The variables can have exponents, these constants or these coefficients can, but they are not added and subtracted. Every single time you come to an addition or subtraction sign, it becomes a new term. So in this case, there are 3 terms, and we're going to talk about these exponents as well. So firstly, we label them by the number of terms. And you've heard me say these different terms before, now we're just actually getting them on paper. If there is one term, we call that a monomial. And mono means one, so monomial. 2, binomial. Bi means 2, a bicycle means 2 wheels. 3, trinomial. Tricycle has 3 wheels, so a trinomial. There are more, but I just like to say any of them, like 4, 5, 6, 7. We just call them a polynomial. Now, technically, a trinomial is a polynomial. It just has a fancy name. Kind of like if we had a right triangle, we call it a right triangle, even though I could just call it a triangle and it'd be fine. So we have all of these. So in this case, there's 1, 2, 3 terms. This is a trinomial. But then we also need to look at something called the degree, and that's based off of the exponents. So every single polynomial has it has 2 names. So in this case, there's one name from this column and there's going to be one name from this column. So in this case, there's a trinomial, but we need to figure out what degree is it. And degrees have to do with the exponents. If you just have x to the first power, or that's the biggest exponent that you have is a 1, or I guess there's not like really one there normally because this is a 1, for example. Normally it's not written. But if you have that, you call that a linear polynomial. If there's just one little tiny x. So in this case right there, that's linear. But because we have x to the second power, so if you have anything to the second power, we call that a quadratic. And we'll do one more. We call that, if something's to the third power, we call that cubic. Because if you were to cube something, you'd put it to the power of 3. And then after, again, if it's like to the 4th power or plus, like if you have x to the 4th, x to the 5th, you just call that a 4th degree. Or a 5th degree or a 6th degree. So let's look at this example. This is a trinomial because there's 3 terms. And let's look over here. What's the biggest exponent? There is a linear exponent, but you always go with the biggest one. So in this case, it's quadratic because you use the biggest exponent. So in that case, it's a quadratic. So when I say name this, you would call this a quadratic trinomial. Now let's look at an example down here. So all you are doing is naming the polynomial. 1, can I name the polynomial? Negative 8x to the 4th plus x squared minus 1. Firstly, what is the degree I guess I should have had those flipped. It doesn't really matter. But what's the degree? What's the biggest exponent? And in this case, it's a 4. So in that case, we call that a 4th degree. And then how many terms are there? There's 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms. That is a 4th degree trinomial. Yay. Let's try another one. And again, at this point, once we're starting with these notes, I'm going a little bit quicker. Pause the video right here. Write this down. Catch up. Where did you get that trinomial? Okay, I'm following along. And then join us for that second example whenever you're ready. 3x to the power of 7 plus 8x to the power of 6 plus 3x minus 4. Now let's look. I'm going to leave this up here so that we can use it. Firstly, we need to know what is the biggest degree. The biggest degree is 7, so it's the 7th degree. And then how many? 4. Okay, then we call that a polynomial. And again, technically that's a polynomial. A 4th degree polynomial would be fine there, but we want to write it as specific as possible. This is where things get kind of tricky. We are going to do an example that involves a little bit of note-taking. So let's look at this example here. 2x to the 4th y plus 3x squared. I'm going to tell you right now it's a binomial. But what's going on with those exponents? What happens when you have 2 exponents? There's an invisible 1 right there. So what happens when we have multiple exponents? And in this case, you just add them. You're just going to add the exponents when there's more than 1 in a term. So in this case, there's a 5th degree, and in this case, there's a 2nd degree, or it's quadratic. But you always use the biggest one. So which exponent is bigger, 5 or 2? And so this is a 5th degree because you use the biggest one. If you followed along there and you're like, okay, like I followed along, I don't really know what just happened, we're going to do a few more examples. But if you feel confident, you can stop the video right here and try your assignment today. So let's look at number 4. Well, let's look at it. I haven't written it down yet. Let's look at this. 4x squared y to the 3rd plus 2x plus 3yx z. And I always put that little cross through z because my z's end up looking like 2's if I write too fast. Okay, this is a trinomial. Done. Perfect. Easy. Yes. Trinomial. Is that how you spell it? Yeah. Okay, trinomial. Now, what degree is it? I already know that it's going to be bigger than linear, quadratic, or cubic because I already have like a 2 and a 3 going on there, so I know that that's going to be bigger. But I'm going to write the degrees down here. So this, when you have a term and there's multiple exponents, you just add it up. So 2 plus 5, that's a 5th term. That's 5. The exponent is 5 total. What's the exponent here? There is no x written, but there's an invisible 1. So that technically has an exponent of 1. This is where it's getting even more tricky. We have exponent of 1, exponent of 1, exponent of 1. They're just invisible. So that's 3, or a 3rd. I don't know where I wrote 3rd. So in this case, you always want to pick the biggest one. Let's look at it. 5th, 1st, and 3rd are the exponents or the degrees. So we pick the biggest one. This is a 5th degree polynomial. Let's do one more if you'd like to do that one more with me. 6xy plus 2x squared plus 3xyz. I'm really playing up that 3xyz. You can see it twice there. So, man, you know what? We're going to add one more. Plus 2. Because in this case, I've done enough trinomials. Let's work on a polynomial. Man, I'm running out of room. That's okay. Now we got to figure out all of the exponents of the terms, and then we'll add them up. This exponent is an exponent of 0 because there is no variable. And if there's no variable, there's no exponent that could exist. In this case, all of these exponents exist, and they have an invisible exponent, so an exponent of 1. So if there's all my exponents added up, that'd be an exponent of 3. Yeah, that one's a little bit easier, exponent of 2. And lastly, each of these have an exponent of 1, so it adds up to 2. So what's the biggest exponent? 3. This is not a third degree polynomial. I mean, technically it is, but that's not what, that's not what you'd write. You'd write a cubic. Because when you cube something, you put it to the third power, and the biggest power is 3. Therefore, that is a cubic polynomial.